the pitch clock. And that pitch clock being when there's no one on base, the pitcher has to deliver a pitch within 15 seconds, and the hitter has to be in the box with their head up and engaged, which we can talk about that rule, with 8 seconds left in the count. And then when there are runners on base, it goes up to 20 seconds for the pitcher. And we've seen there's been a dramatic shift so far. Jake, what have your impressions been of watching these quicker paced games with this pitch clock?
I think we have to keep in mind like this is a preliminary kind of test run for it. There's no guarantee that this is what the numbers are going to look like seconds wise, for the rest of the season. I think there's going to be plenty of trial and error. But we've been seeing guys like quickly have to get acclimated to it. Just how many outs have been called just on the pitch clock alone at this point. I think
So
that the
many. I mean,
pitchers
we had
are
a game end, which it was so spring training. We had a game end in a tie because a hitter wasn't engaged. He wasn't looking up after the 8 seconds, so he got rung up on strikes with the bases loaded. I think it was Red Sox Braves. And then
yeah.
the game ended in a tie because you don't play extras in exhibition games. That would be crazy. I'm not mad about the tie, nor am I mad about really the game ending. But yeah, we've had a good few, like at least 4 to 5 every day. We see highlights of at the very least.
Yeah. And I think the pitchers have the innate advantage at this point just because the pitchers already start ramping up earlier than the hitters do in terms of getting to spring training early, all that. So their velo's pretty much closer to where it would be towards opening day. But on top of that, I feel like most pitchers in general like operate better when they're pitching at a tempo. You see a guy get in a groove, he's getting right back to the mound in the first place. So we've seen that in particular with Wandy Peralta with the Yankees. He gets right back to the mound. I think he threw, what was it, 3 pitches in 10 seconds or something like it was something crazy where he
He struck
struck
out a
out.
hitter in 20 seconds.
Yes, there we go. So I think that it kind of eliminates the whole thinking part of pitching, which is a really cool aspect because a lot of guys falter the most mentally rather than physically. So I think that will kind of eliminate certain misnomers in terms of people struggling, with just overthinking. But at the same time, it's going to be quite the process, just trying to get everyone's feet wet with it to the point where like batters in particular are going to need to like recognize like I need to be ready to go before this pitch is even thrown. Like you have to make sure you're ready to make adjustments on the fly without overthinking it essentially.
Yeah, I have really liked this rule change. And I know there's been a bunch of calls that people are like, "Oh my God, it was so marginal, that like ruins the flow of the game." I would hope and I would assume that we're at the point now where in the games where it doesn't matter, we're having umpires be like letter of the law enforcing like to a T, so that way people over adjust. So like batters, like you shouldn't come MLB playoff games, you don't want a batter being on the line of 8 seconds, 9 seconds in a playoff game. I think once we get to a late stage playoff game, like we see it in the NFL even with the play clock. Like sometimes you see that double zeros and the center
Mhm.
still has the ball and the quarterback is clapping and they don't throw a flag. And I think there's merit to that. But right now they're really enforcing it because they want pitchers and batters both to over adjust. So be ready like 1 or 2 seconds before the threshold. That way we improve the pace. So if you're ready at 8.2 seconds as a batter, or if you throw the pitch, we saw a call where I forget what pitcher it was, but their leg wasn't down. Was it Karinchak of the
Yeah.
Guardians?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
so he
that's
was
what it was.
he was in his windup, but his front leg hadn't come down at the 15-second mark or the 20-second mark. I forget if there was a runner on. And he was called a ball for it. I don't think we'll see that even in the regular season at all. Maybe here and there, maybe early in the count, nobody on base, that kind of thing, just to ingrain it into these guys. But right now, I like to see strict enforcement because when we have the strict enforcement, when we're able to bend the rules, the pace will still be really quick.
Yep.
And as someone who goes to a lot of games, it's a big difference between the average game last year was about 3 hours and 5 minutes. And Yankees games tend to skew a little bit longer because of the nature of their pitching changes. Boone likes to change pitchers in the middle of innings as opposed to in between innings. So Yankees games averaged about 315 to 320 last year. So as someone you talk about a 7-10 first pitch, the end of the game, you're budgeting yourself in for 10:30 ending every game. And then
Mhm.
commuting home, going midweek with families, now right now the average is 2:45, just about that in spring training so far, which is huge. That means you're ending games before 10 o'clock on a 7-10 start, which I
Yeah,
think will be really good for the game. It's also giving a lot of action. Um, and it's looked good so far. I think it will change the way that the game is played a little bit. Uh, I was always, like you said, I was always confused why pitchers were complaining about, oh, all these rules are helping the offense. Because if you've ever played wiffle ball or like stick ball growing up, if you had a smart pitcher or like um just know a dad who was throwing, getting the ball back, getting right on the mound, and trying to quick pitch you, that was always advantage pitcher.
yeah,
So as a hitter, I know that something that I try to do in amateur baseball, granted, is always dictate the pace. And I have my routine. And I stay in the box, I make it quick, but I put my hand up, I'm getting ready, I don't have my head up. So the umpire is telling the pitcher to call time. And, as a hitter, you're not controlling a lot of variables. And that's something that you could do in the past. And now you can't do that. So I
yeah.
think this will be advantage pitcher, which I'd like to see, Wandy being on the rubber, catching the ball, calling the pitch himself, and throwing it in 4 seconds was really fun. And I hope we
That's
see that a lot
awesome.
from Wandy, from
Yeah,
Canely. Um, Someone who I'm concerned about is Loizaga, who has barely thrown so far. And with the new rules, and he's known for being really long on the mound, and now he's going to play for Team Nicaragua. I hope they have a quick exit, which they probably will, so he can get back to spring. But and they're not using those rules in the World Baseball Classic, so I'm hoping that he'll be able to solidify his routine if he hasn't been working on that already.
yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side, I think this gives batters an opportunity to actually focus more on bat to ball rather than striking out like crazy.
Yep.
And they don't have as much time to think about launch angle and things like that. So it should benefit both sides ultimately. I personally love it. You love it. Um, I think that the old school baseball lifers might have an issue adjusting to it, but at the end of the day, they have to see it as not the MLB trying to appeal specifically to them, but rather bringing in a new crowd of audience, a younger demographic that has more, short attention spans, are used to explosive plays in basketball, NFL, NBA, etc.
It's a weird bell curve with this kind of rule because in baseball and in politics and everything, you can always kind of tell if you have an understanding of the realm that you're in with a new rule, with a new law, right? Who's gonna like it, who's gonna dislike it, what's the culture war gonna be, that kind of thing. So there's like types of baseball fans you usually think about. With this kind of rule, it's really interesting because the really old school baseball fans are used to a brand of baseball that was very fast, 2 hour, 15 minutes, early in the count contact, you know, making the infielders work, that fast, like the turf of the 70s, like that fast paced ball getting through. Um, and then there's that area in between where baseball went to more home run, went to steroid era. And now recently it's been kind of the worst of both worlds, where there's been these super technically gifted fielders and hitters who are relying on home run balls because of all these rules. There was the artificial the live balls, where there were just home runs being hit willy-nilly, and then we went back to dead ball. Last year was not a dead ball year, but the ball was definitely reduced. Offense was down overall to the last 20 years of baseball. So it's really interesting. I think a lot of the pushback is people who are generally resistant to change and who are
Mm-hmm.
always going to be up in arms about stuff. But I think if you
Yeah.
go back, I think like kids our age and our grandpas are probably most in lockstep about any baseball rule change, as we've seen in a while, because I think um, they're going to see a game that they grew up watching and liking. And as a young fan, I know sometimes you can hear an older fan seeming like they're yelling off their front porch talking about how their game was better. If you go back and watch like World Series games or playoff games from like the 60s and 70s, you're not going to see as good of an athlete. You're not seeing big home runs, but it is a really entertaining product. the ball constantly being in play is something that we're just not used to. I think last year it was about one ball in play every 4 minutes or so,
Yeah.
which that's a lot of break in action. That is people rag on football for having, a quick 5 second play, 10-second play, and then a 45-second break. They're doing 4 plays every 4 minutes. Baseball is doing one in play. And yeah, foul balls and the strategy to go in between that if you're a real diehard fan, but you can't just cater um, a professional league at a big scale for only the diehard fan. You have to cater to the young kids, the different attention
Yeah.
spans, the different time that families can take. So I'm all for this pitch clock rule and the enhanced pace of play.
Yep, and I think that that also ties in directly with the bigger plates. The bigger bases is certainly speeding up the running game a lot, which is awesome because I mean we got to see Anthony Volpe steal 2 bases back to back within 15 seconds of each other, um, pitch after pitch, and I think that's really kind of letting these younger players that are coming through the systems now shine because they're actually able to showcase the tools that they have naturally. So that's a nice little change of pace as well. I think the one that is going to get very seedy is the throwovers. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's the one where I'm a little bit more iffy on in general. That and also the runner on second, the ghost runner for extra innings. That one's still like I don't like it, but I understand why they're doing it. But with the limited throwovers, I think that's going to really change the strategy of the game.
Yeah, that is something that our Sandlot team had a not an argument, but a conversation about in our WhatsApp chat. And I think there's merit to that because as someone who runs the bases a lot, I like when I first heard the rule, I'm like, that's great. We're gonna see a bunch of stolen bases.
Yeah.
So basically, the rule for those who are unfamiliar is that pitchers are only allowed to disengage from the rubber 3 times within one at bat. So, does that reset if the bases are taken?
No, I don't think so.
Gotcha. All right. So basically, to prevent guys just stepping off and wiping their sweat and throwing over 4 times, um, you get one throw over. If it's unsuccessful, if all the runners are safe, you get the ball back. You get a second throw over, unsuccessful, you get the ball back. Now, at that point, on your third attempt, if you were to step off the rubber, you would have to pick off the runner. Otherwise, on the third attempt, they would get a free base.
It's
All
like a
runners.
box essentially.
It's like
Yeah.
a balk. Yeah. So the third time that you step off and you don't pick off someone. So basically that third time, it would have to be a runner with like a massive lead that knows that you can't throw over and or that it's unlikely to throw over and they'd have to be like halfway between first and second.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we're gonna see, I think, is very one, I think we're gonna have a lot of guys running early, like first pitch, because you have to be very selective because if you burn your throw over before you throw the first pitch of an at bat, now you're looking at someone who might just milk an at bat and take pitches. So that way someone like Anthony Volpe, someone someone like Byron Buxton, they have like a much higher chance of taking that base because there's fewer opportunities to neutralize their speed.
Yeah.
We're not going to see the fake moves anymore where you like, no, the lefty just like lobs it over, the John Lester non-existent pick off move, that kind of thing. So I don't love it right now. But I do like it as someone who wants to see a lot of stolen bases. I like it as someone who knows this Yankees roster and thinks that that will help us ultimately,
Yeah.
especially given how prolific Trevino can be with backpicking. And Higgy, I think that's going to be a new added element for these catchers that can like throw 90 miles an hour from their knees. Um,
Hmm.
where if guys get too ambitious on their secondaries, they're gonna on their secondary leads, to clarify, they might be taken advantage of. But I understand it being very strict. Like I understand pitchers are in a really tough spot to hold runners on,
And another
especially
thing
with
that
bigger
it changed,
bases.
yep, it also changes the outlook of how to stall time when you're looking for a pitcher warming up in the bullpen.
Yeah.
That's like something I just kind of thought about right now because you
Mhm.
see a lot of guys just throwing over at like if let's say it's a relief pitcher who's struggling, he's just throwing over to first base to allow time for whichever reliever's coming in next to get his reps in the bullpen. So this is something that also will drastically alter like the way that teams approach how they're going to go about delegating their bullpen moves.
Yeah, there's no getting a guy warm and getting him in for the next hitter anymore.
Yeah.
Because we would see that it would be obvious as day. Like you'd look in the bullpen and, you know, Johnny Loizaga or Wandy Peralta would be like sprinting to get ready and throwing pitch, pitch, pitch. And then, like Clay Holmes in a pickle would be, taking off his hat, wiping the sweat. Trevino would call a pick off the first, the lob over. And what I like about that is when it comes to the relief pitcher game, one, like these relievers have such an advantage. Like they're dominant pitchers. We see so many of them that can get 2, 3 outs, a different look that you haven't seen in the game before. They throw so fast. I think it neutralizes some of their specialty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might see some more reliance on the starting pitcher, maybe down the line. We'll see where the data kind of gets us with these new rules. But also, I think sometimes we find the end of the game like drags on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we've gone to games where it's been an hour and 5 minutes through 6 innings, and then a 2 hour last 3 innings, because the eighth and the ninth get tight, and you have these mound visits. You have bringing relievers in, and even though they have the timeout limit and the substitution limit, it's like no one really threatens um,
Yeah.
getting to the end of those, and it still prolongs the game. So that could be an advantage. I do think we're going to see a lot of stolen bases this year. I think Byron Buxton, if he stays healthy, could
Dude,
go 44.
Corbin Carroll's gonna steal 80 bases.
Yeah.
Like straight up.
I mean, Anthony Volpe had about 50 stolen bases in
He had 50
minor
literally
leagues
last year. Yeah.
under the same rule. So if you're going to look at some of these young guys who have experience in AAA and AA, where these rules have been implemented, these bigger bases, the pitcher rubber disengagement rules, and they might have an advantage over some of these seasoned pros.
Oh, absolutely. They've done it before. So like this is going to be completely brand new to guys. I mean, a good Hall of Fame caliber pitcher who's in year 15 is going to figure it out. But someone who's been in the league long enough, like they're going to have a little bit of an adjustment period. So I would expect the young guys to kind of thrive right off the bat.